the next thing that we're going to look at is under our list. We're going to talk about the different ways that you can set up your ICD-10 code. So we do get that question often. It's probably the most common question that we get is, does my system come with ICD-10 codes preloaded in it? It does not. And how do I get them in? So I'm going to cover, there's actually 5 different ways that you can load ICD-10 codes into Lytec. So I'm going to cover each of those ways. All right, so if you come back to your list, to your diagnosis code list, the first way is going to be probably your most obvious way, right? And that's going to be to come in here and hit New and to add your diagnosis codes. So you'll see that this window has changed slightly. Diagnosis code up here is really what we would consider your internal code. So it's the code that you're going to see when you're doing your postings or anything else. This is not the code that will get pulled onto your claim, so you can literally put anything that you wanted in that field. Probably the most common practice, though, is that when you set up your ICD-9 codes, you just went ahead and put your ICD-9 code there, because that's probably the most common way people will look it up. I would recommend, if you're setting up your ICD-10 codes, to go ahead and put your ICD-10 code there. So I'm going to just set up a new code. Well, looks like I've already started setting that one up. But you'll see that once you set this up, you can put in your description there, and then I'm just going to call it acute dominant pain. And you'll see there's actually these little copy tools down here. So I can copy it down here. If I wanted to copy it to ICD-9 as well, I can, but this is where it's different. This is what we call our mapping section. So back when we set up our insurances and we told the insurance whether or not to pull the ICD-9 or the ICD-10, when I use this code in my system, if my insurance is set to pull an ICD-10 code, it's going to look for whatever is in this field. So these are the fields that you want to have match exactly what you would want to go on the claim if you were billing it for either ICD-10 or ICD-9. And we do allow you to have a mapping to both codes. So if you are one of those practices that may be dealing with that after October 1st, that you have an insurance company that needs an ICD-9 and then a secondary that needs an ICD-10, you can still use one code on your billing, and the insurance will is set so that it knows which code to actually send on the claim itself. Now that will only work if you, of course, have it mapped to both an ICD-9 and an ICD-10. So I would go ahead and put in here my ICD-9 code that it maps to. Okay. So if I were manually setting it up, then you can manually set up your codes by doing that method. Again, you're not required to have the mapping for both, but if you are one of those scenarios where either one, you want to start using and testing your codes today prior to that October 1st deadline, and you still want the claims to go out with an ICD-9, you can start setting up your ICD-10s, and since you have it mapped based off of that data service, the insurance will still pull the ICD-9 if that ICD-9 field is filled out. After October 1st, it would no longer look at that ICD-9 code. So it is possible, if you are still going to just try to manage the two lists, to only set it up with the ICD-10 code. But that is why the mapping is there, is to, one, help you with that transition into ICD-10. It also can kind of help you when you're doing your lookups, because if you're used to your ICD-9 code and you search for any codes that you have with that ICD-9 map, you could see what all of your options would be for ICD-10 if you have them set up that way. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. So that is the first method that you could use to, and that is to just manually create your ICD-10 codes. Again, we're kind enough to take advantage of some of the things that CMS had released for you. So we do have another tool that you can use that comes with the system, and that is, if you go under your Tools menu over here, you'll have under your ICD-10 tools this tool that's called Create ICD-10 Mappings. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. So the way that this tool works is it is going to look at any of the codes that you currently have in your system. So any of your ICD-10 codes that are already in that diagnosis list, and then it's going to suggest, based off of the GEMs, the General Equivalency Mappings that were published by CMS, it's going to suggest any of the ICD-10 codes that are on that list. So right now, when I'm clicking over, you have two different options. You have one that's called our one-to-one mappings. And then, so what this is doing is it's looking at in this data set that I'm in right now, these are all my existing ICD-9 codes. And you can see that it found on that GEM list a one-to-one mapping for that. So if I wanted to then select these, and you can select them one at a time, or you can do the select all option if you want to just create everything that's on there. But if I do that, then what it's going to do, it's not going to update the code that I have in my system. It's actually going to create a brand new code that has both the ICD-9 and the ICD-10 mapped in it, and where code, your internal code, is your ICD-10 code. All right? So it's going to help you build out your ICD-10 library with the codes that are common based off of what you already use. Now, one thing that you need to be aware of with this, the one thing I love about it is it's not going to clog up your whole diagnosis list with all these diagnoses in the library that you don't use for ICD-10, but one, it has the mappings, and it is going to be more accurate because there's not room for user error when you're doing that. In other words, you're not going to be miskeying a code or anything like that. But on the downside, if you kind of look through this list, sometimes there is a one-to-one match where it's straightforward like this, like typhoid fever. But if you look through here, by and large, it's going to give you what we call the unspecified codes. So it's not going to be, I don't want anyone to go away with the impression that all you need to do is use this mapping tool and you're going to have every ICD-10 code that you need in your system. The things that, so by and large, it's going to map you to what we call an unspecified code. Some of the features in ICD-10, if you've done any of your ICD-10 training already, one of the reasons why the code set expanded so much is because there's features like laterality, like your left and your right, and trimesters and things like that. So this is going to give you the unspecified code, but it's not going to give you the lefts and the rights and things like that. So you may find that you may still need to add additional codes to your system in addition to these, but this is going to be a great start for you. All right. So this is how you, again, and some people will use this as an opportunity to clean up their list. I know as I've been helping practices implement or get ready for ICD-10, they've come in and they've realized they've got, a big history of codes that they've used, but there's, sometimes codes that you don't use in your practice any longer. So it does allow you to kind of go through these one at a time. And you'll notice if I only select one and I say create selected code, it's going to remove that off my list. So you can actually use this as like a work list feature for you. So you can either go through them. It's telling me it was created, and you can see it's no longer on my list now. So I'm only getting presented with my remaining ICD-9 codes that I haven't created any mappings for yet. Okay? So, and again, if you're comfortable and you just want to do them all at once, you can select all and just create selected codes from that. All right, so those are our one-to-one mappings. Sometimes under ICD-10, it's not as straightforward as a one-to-one map, and we have one-to-multiple mapping. So you do have a tab over here called Other Mappings, and you'll see that it's a split screen. So if I select one code up here at the top, it's going to show me the multiple mappings that it has for this under ICD-10. So you still get to pick and choose like what things you want loaded. Like sometimes you might find things that I've seen a code that maps to like 160 different codes, things like that. You will see that even under the multiple mappings, a lot of times you're going to still see more of the unspecified codes. So I do want you to, again, be aware that it just might not be enough, but it is a great start for you. Okay? So it works in a similar way. You're just going to check off the ones that you want, and then you're going to create the selected codes, and that will add new codes to your diagnosis library for you. All right. So that's the second way. I do want to pause for a moment. I know I've just started talking about the unspecified codes and things like that. And I know there's a lot of uncertainty about this October 1st date. We do our very best as we get industry news to push that information out to you. So if you're not already aware, we have a blog. It's just go to ascop.com/blog. You can subscribe to our blog up here, so anytime we post something new, it'll automatically be emailed to you, so you don't necessarily have to go and monitor it. But I did want to point out that that many of you may have heard about this grace period for ICD-10 that CMS announced. I believe it was back in July. As we get information like that, we do post it to the blog to keep you up to date on any of the industry type news. But on the good side, I did want to point out that just for Medicare only, so for your claims, they have said that their claims with non-specific codes are still going to get paid. So they have given you a 1-year grace period to learn your new codes and to start. They're basically saying, like, hey, we're not going to deny a claim as long as the code that you're submitting is from the same code family. So if this time you forgot to do the left or the right or whatever and you sent me the unspecified code, we're still going to get you paid. So I did want to point that out, that is available. Some people have misinterpreted that the grace period means that they can still send ICD-9 codes. That is not the case. They're still requiring that you send an ICD-10 code. They're just going to be a little bit more lenient with you right now on still pushing some of those through and getting them paid while you're learning the new code set. Now, keep in mind, though, that this is for this is a CMS announcement only. So if you bill other insurance companies, there's a good chance they're not going to be as lenient on you. A lot of them may follow this, follow CMS in this, but a lot of them may not. I don't think, like Leah's pointed out before, I don't think it's always the first. They're not always super eager to get everybody paid. So anyway, there's some other things about that grace period that are up there, but I did want to just point out that that's a resource to you, first of all, and then just to clarify some of that information that people have questions on what that grace period is, and that, hey, especially since we're talking about that code mapping tool, it's a really great start because it's going to get you to October 1st, and then as you're learning the code, you can add the more specified codes in as you go along. All right. Okay, so let's jump back into Lytec now, and we're going to talk about the other options we have for loading your ICD-10 codes. Besides the code mapping tool and manual entry, you can also purchase, it is an add-on product, but we do have a code import tool. So you basically purchase a file of all of the ICD-10 codes, and then you can load those into your system. So the way that you do that is if you've made that purchase, you're going to go to your Tools menu, and you can go to Import right here, and then you'll see that there's Diagnosis Code. And essentially what you get with that purchase is a file. So you would point it to wherever that file is that you've copied down or stored to your hard drive. And then you're going to, it does come with both ICD-9 and ICD-10 codes, so if you are still someone that is needing to bill an ICD-9 or anything like that, and maybe you just purchased Lytec, you can import your ICD-9 codes. But otherwise, you would just select your ICD-10 codes and then go ahead and open that file, and it will actually give you the entire library of all the ICD-10 CM codes. So you would get all 68,000 loaded into your system. Approximately 68,000. So that is an option that's available to you. One thing I will point out on that one, those codes that are imported are not going to be mapped to ICD-9. So they will import the ICD-10 codes and create them for you. However, there's not going to be a mapped ICD-9 for those codes. So again, may or may not be a big deal for your practice, because if you're not one of those exceptions to the rule where you're trying to handle payers that want an ICD-9 and payers that want an ICD-10, then you only deal with ICD-10. That might be a really good option for you, just to get all of your codes built in the system. On the good side, it's quick, it's accurate, and it's all loaded. So, and if you are a billing service or anything like that, or a practice that has multiple databases, it's also a convenient way to load codes into multiple databases. All right. So that's how you're going to, that's an option that's available to you. The next option that's available to you is also an add-on product. So I'm going to show you that. I'm going to go back to my list over here under diagnosis codes, and you're going to see and hear if I do a new code. Actually, let me click on my search here. It's this tool right here, Encoder Pro. So Encoder Pro is also an add-on product, so there is cost to it. However, the cost of it is generally not much more or equal to what you may be spending on coding books. So besides just giving you diagnosis codes, it is also going to give you CPT codes as well, so it can help you build your procedures list as well. But it is, I like to think of it as a tool that replaces your coding book, so you don't need to purchase them anymore. Encoder Pro goes above and beyond what, it's not just like a code import tool. It actually gives you all the same features and more that you would get in your coding book. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this right here and show you how that works. And it's actually launching off of the one I have selected, but I'm going to go ahead and just, one of the benefits of it is that you can use common or lay terms when you're using Encoder Pro. So sometimes if you're searching for a code, you're not always sure of what the clinical term might have been, right? Might not always know exactly what the description is for the code that I'm looking for, because your practice may refer to it differently than what the medical book does, right? So you can use lay terms. So instead of looking up gastroesophageal reflux disease or anything like that, I can just search using that term, and you can see that it's given me, I can look for just my ICD-10 results or ICD-9 results. The reason I say it replaces your coding books is because as you drill down on these, like if I select one of these, it's going to tell me all the same information I would find in my book, which is, hey, a fourth character is required on that, or what might be excluded if I tried to use that code. And you can see, for one, it's going to be much faster. It's like using a phone book versus using Google, right? It's going to be much faster to locate your codes versus thumbing through a book and then having to thumb to another page and things like that. It's going to show me all my results in one screen. And if I needed to jump into one of these other, diagnosis, like, oh, well, it excludes that, and that's actually relevant to what I'm doing, you can see you can jump into that. It gives you some alerts down here. You can actually do some bookmarking and a lot of other cool things, but I'm going to stick to some of the basics for us. So once we find the code that we want to import into our system, you can see up here, I found it under ICD-10. If I had gone the opposite way and I had looked for something that I already know under ICD-9, it would actually, I could actually map to ICD-10 by finding it in ICD-9 first. So either way you search for the code or find your code, once it's selected, you'll see that I can now, besides just having this ICD-10 code, I can click on ICD-9, and I can find, based off of those gems from CMS, a more specific code. There's also Optimum, which is another resource for code mapping. So besides just the gems, you can look on that tab as well, and that might suggest some other mappings for you. So once you find the mapping, you can just say map. You'll see that it's going to load both my ICD-10 and my ICD-9 code. And then when I hit OK, it's going to add it to my library for me. So one of the nice things is you really have access to the entire code set library, the whole manual, all the little tips and tricks and everything that are in there. And again, not just for your diagnosis codes, but it'll also give you information for your CPT codes and modifiers and things like that that can help you on the billing side. So once you have access to the full library, but you can maintain in Lytec just the list of the ones that you use for billing. So on the downside, though, that is going to be, it's going to import just one at a time. So it's not like a bulk import, but if you need to look up or add a code to your system, like maybe you've already used the mapping tool and you just want to verify that there's not a more specific code, you can search for those and find the more specific codes using that method. All right, so that is a way, another way that you can load your ICD-10 codes. The last way, I'm not really going to show you this way, but there are, if you are using Lytec MD for, for your electronic medical records, or if you're using McKesson Practice Choice, which is our online, our cloud-based electronic medical record that interfaces with or is integrated with Lytec. If you're using either one of those methods, then you know that during your documentation you're able to capture procedures in your diagnosis, and that both of those products have been ICD-10 ready for some time. So since you're already coding an ICD-10 over there, if you're using the electronic encounter forms in Lytec MD, those transactions, when they transmit over, will actually create your ICD-10 with the ICD-9 maps for you. So if it's code that's not already in your system, it'll actually just add it to the system for you. And same thing if you're using the cloud-based product for your electronic medical records and you're capturing procedures and charges over there, you can send those charges into Lytec, and you'll see under your billings, those come into your pending transactions section. So any of the diagnoses that are sent over from there, they will be mapped with the ICD-10 and the ICD-9, and it will automatically add them to your list for you if it's a code that is new to your system. So that is a fifth way to get codes in, is by simply sending transactions over from those EHR systems. All right, so I'm going to go through just a quick review of that for us. Those are the 5 different ways. Your manual entry, or you can use the mapping tool. Those first 2 are, of course, included with your product. Codes on Disk and Encoder Pro are other optional ways to get your ICD-10 codes loaded. They are additional costs, but they can be a great time saver for you. And then the last one is, again, if you have one of our EHR products that's compatible with Lytec, Lytec MD or McKesson Practice Choice, just sending those over will come. So just to review the pros on the manual entry, I think one of the big pros on it is really your code's your way, right? Like if you're used to searching for it by a certain description or anything like that, you can always add your own descriptions. You're not stuck with some of those more medical type terms. But on the downside, it is going to be your most time-consuming option, and you are leaving yourself open for room for human error. So if you miskey something, you might be transmitting a code, but it still might not be a code that's going to get paid or rejected. All right. And then the ICD-10 mapping tool, great way to, quick and easy way to load codes based on the ICD-9 codes that are already in your system. So there's really not any downside to that. The only downside is that it's only it might not be enough. So just keep in mind when you use that tool, just don't expect it to be an end-all be-all type tool, because by and large you are going to get all of your unspecified codes loaded, which again is a great start for you, but you still may need to add additional codes to your system to get those more specific codes in there. All right, and then codes on disk, or the Lytec code import, pro on that is just that it's a bulk import. It's going to get your codes loaded super fast. Just keep in mind that it does not include any mappings between ICD-9 and ICD-10. So if you are one of those practices that's going to have to deal with some carriers on ICD-9 and some on ICD-10, you would be probably a bit more of a headache if you have codes that are not mapped, because you'll have to be more aware of the codes that you're using at the time of entering. All right. And then the last, sorry, not the last one, the other option that we have for you is Encoder Pro. I do need to mention, when you purchase that product, you get it in two different methods. One is the integrated method that I showed you right there, where you can launch it from within Lytec, and it will, from inside the diagnosis list, and once you search for it, you can map to it and pull it in, and it will add the code. That integrated functionality is actually only available to our professional and client server versions of Lytec. So if you are on single or multi-user version, you can still get Encoder Pro, but it's going to be more of a standalone. You'd use it to look up and find your codes and things like that, but it wouldn't actually import into your system. Not 100% sure why that is. It is a third-party product, though, and I do need to make you aware of that. So I love the search capabilities. I love all the extra tools in it. So there are a lot of pros to that, and of course, the fact that you're not going to have to spend money on coding books, because you can get all that same information in Encoder Pro is another great feature to it. If there's a downside, besides if you happen to be on some of the single-user or multi-user version, so you'll get a more limited functionality in Encoder Pro. The only other downside is that you're going to have to search for them one at a time. And that may be on the good side. It means you have access to the entire library without, clogging up your diagnosis list with every code out there. But just be aware of that. You do have to add those codes into your system by looking them up and then pulling them in. All right, and then that last way again is just if it's going to transfer, if you send those transactions over from your electronic health records or your EMR systems, Lytec MD or McKesson Practice Choice, there is no manual entry or preloading when they transfer over. If the code's not there, it will just create it for you, and it does include the mapping, so a lot of upsides to that.
Hey, thanks for watching. Hope you liked the video and found it helpful. If you did, let us know by giving us a thumbs up by clicking on the like button below. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, feel free to write those in the comments section below. And if you want to get more helpful videos like this one, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Thanks!